Why did half of the 12,000 UH-1 Huey helicopters deployed to Vietnam crash? The answer hid directly within the fundamental fuselage design. Military planners in Washington initially believed that sheer flight speed would provide adequate protection against heavy enemy fire. Reality proved them wrong. Bell engineers built the primary wartime transport exclusively from light aluminum and plastic to keep the empty weight under 2,300 kilograms. Pilots sat behind thin, completely transparent plexiglass that offered no ballistic protection against incoming rounds. The exterior skin wrapping the aircraft measured less than a single millimeter in thickness. Small shrapnel pierced it effortlessly. Early air-mobile tactics relied entirely on these highly vulnerable machines, sending unprotected aircraft straight into the thickest combat zones of Southeast Asia. Insertions required the pilot to hover low and keep the aircraft perfectly still over the landing zone. In those vulnerable seconds, Viet Cong guerrillas directed concentrated rifle fire directly into the exposed belly. Bullets severed the fuel lines. The Lycoming engines starved and failed mid-air. The engineering choices made for agility ultimately dictated a catastrophic combat attrition rate. Out of 12,000 deployed transports, the total downed machines reached exactly 6,000. 4 men planted Claymore mines in Vietnam. The perimeter held. The squad commander whispered over the radio in pitch darkness. His call was frantic. Enemy forces closed in fast. Unarmored transport helicopters forced a brutal choice. Headquarters canceled the rescue mission. The risk was too high. Standard utility ships lacked factory armor. Thin aluminum stopped nothing. A night extraction guaranteed destruction. Flights stopped. Command left the 4 scouts behind. The jungle waited. Options vanished. Time ran out. But 2 gunship pilots monitored the distress frequency. They blatantly ignored the direct stand-down order from headquarters and immediately started their engines. While those 4 scouts awaited extraction, how could pilots defend a naked aircraft lacking factory armament? Base crews found an answer. They independently modified their helicopters with M60 machine guns. Mechanics ignored official blueprints. They secured the heavy infantry weapons using simple elastic bungee cords and makeshift metal pintle mounts. A crew chief hooked the M60 to the elastic tether. The helicopter dropped rapidly into the hot landing zone. The door gunner unleashed continuous covering fire from the open cabin. Heavy vibration from the firing weapon rattled the fragile aluminum airframe. But the enemy held a massive tactical advantage. North Vietnamese forces operated Soviet 12.7mm anti-aircraft weapons, converted from 51 caliber designs. These heavy guns significantly outranged the improvised American weapons. Even a short burst from a Kalashnikov assault rifle at close range proved fatal. The fuselage offered zero resistance. It consisted of less than 1 millimeter of bare aluminum. Bullets easily severed exposed fuel lines. Ground logistics drivers bolted steel plates and stacked sandbags on their trucks. Aviation crews lacked that luxury. Strict weight limits prohibited heavy armor. Their only defense was aggressive forward firepower. This desperate field engineering fundamentally changed aerial combat. A new strike class emerged. More firepower meant less efficiency. But integrating M60 machine guns and rocket pods disrupted the delicate weight balance of this light machine. An overloaded helicopter could no longer escort transport groups. Crews wanted a flying fortress. They built a sluggish target. Mechanics stripped the wide cabins. They bolted miniguns to the floor. They attached forward-firing rocket pods directly to the landing skids. Pilots named these heavily armed variants Huey gunships. Their primary job was to protect unarmed transport helicopters, known as slicks, during dangerous combat extractions. The maximum takeoff weight of the UH-1 hovered around 4 tons. Every installed grenade launcher critically reduced the fuel capacity. Every heavy box of ammunition stole precious flight time. Commanders expected armed helicopters to completely solve the defense problem. The reality proved otherwise. Due to weapon weight, gunships lacked the fuel for long-term escort of transports. A heavy Huey could not fly ahead of the slicks, suppress a landing zone, and remain on station. The engines strained against the load. The rotors struggled. The military urgently required a dedicated strike platform like the AH-1G Cobra helicopter. The standard transport hull retained a wide aerodynamic drag profile and completely lacked the structural strength to withstand direct ground fire. How did a machine without a troop compartment change fire support? The urgent demand for protected aerial cover forged a platform fundamentally hostile to infantry. The military deployed 300 Cobra helicopters into the combat zone. This move instantly replaced improvised transports with dedicated aerial artillery. The airframe dictated the new rules. The narrow cockpit housed exactly 2 crew members. There were no passenger seats. There was no cargo deck. Engineers traded every cubic inch of transport space for lethal payload. This strict specialization forced crews to push the flight envelope to the edge. Top speed hit 219 kilometers per hour. The operational range extended to 300 kilometers. But velocity alone could not defeat ground fire. Survival meant staying invisible. Crews mastered nap-of-the-earth flight profiles. They pushed the aircraft down until the skids nearly clipped the branches. Tropical trees stood 30 meters tall, acting as a physical shield against enemy line of sight. The dense foliage swallowed the engine acoustics. A dull, rhythmic thumping of the main rotor blades served as the only acoustic footprint. The helicopter hugged the terrain contours to blind ground trackers. It raced just meters above the jungle canopy. The strike zone appeared. Pilots sharply gained altitude before the attack. A new strike era began with old parts, pure assault outside, old transport inside. Engineers crammed a massive engine into a 91-centimeter fuselage. Bell named it Model 209. The rotor remained standard. The transmission stayed identical. 80% of parts matched the Huey, a pragmatic patch. The military bypassed new supply chains. Mechanics fixed the advanced gunships using basic transport spares. The rush had a strict cause. Deadlines fell apart. The AH-56 Cheyenne program lagged years behind schedule. The Army needed firepower right now. The military urgently ordered mass production of the prototype. The urgent 1967 production order transformed a narrow prototype into the serial AH-1G Cobra. Why seat the pilot and gunner one behind the other? This layout radically narrowed the frontal projection of the machine. The slender silhouette sliced the air. It left enemy anti-aircraft gunners with a minimal target area. Form followed the brutal demand of survival. The gunner took the front seat. He commanded the chin-mounted turret and the rocket pods. The pilot sat directly in the rear. He controlled the flight path from a slightly elevated position. This exact tandem seating scheme introduced here would soon become the global standard for all future attack helicopters. The first operational units touched down in Vietnam by August 1967. Engineers packed the tight fuselage with technical countermeasures. They wrapped the crew in heavy armored seats. They installed self-sealing fuel tanks to prevent catastrophic fires from ground strikes. The Cobra used high speed and a razor-thin profile as its primary defense against heavy machine guns. Steel plates protected the fuel. Armor shielded the crew. But the glass remained thin. The gunner pressed into the seat. Airflow battered the thin plexiglass. He dropped a heavy ceramic plate onto his uniform. It hit hard. Crews called them chicken plates. Because the AH-1G plexiglass offered zero ballistic protection, crews compensated with personal armor and a hail of rockets. Below the nose, the turret spun. It housed a 7.62mm M134 minigun. The 6-barrel weapon unleashed up to 6,000 rounds per minute. A 40mm grenade launcher sat beside it. Sometimes the turret jammed. The gunner locked it forward. The pilot took over. He pivoted the entire helicopter. Target locked. He fired. 70mm Hydra rockets left the tubes. Engineers converted them from 2.75-inch munitions. The high explosive impact matched light artillery. Offense became defense. Firepower replaced passive armor. Active suppression cleared the zone. Stub wings held the payload. Each pod carried from 7 to 19 rockets. How do you neutralize an overwhelming firepower advantage from the sky? North Vietnamese troops found the answer by closing the combat distance to the bare minimum. Enemy units deliberately pressed their front lines directly against American infantry positions, utilizing a brutal close-quarters tactic they called hugging the belt. This proximity created a massive problem for high-speed aircraft trying to deliver payloads. F-4 Phantoms approached targets at speeds over 800 kilometers per hour. Their immense velocity made accurate visual recognition of ground elements impossible for the crews. 230-kilogram bombs fell blindly. Muffled explosions from jet-launched strikes routinely shook the earth dangerously close to friendly trenches. Friendly fire became inevitable. The AH-1 Cobra attack helicopter fundamentally altered this chaotic battlefield dynamic. These gunships provided precision support, exactly where high-speed jets previously decimated their own units. The solution was visibility. A clear sight line through the narrow canopy gave the pilot direct visual contact with the ground below. The pilot sharply reduced his airspeed over the combat zone and visually distinguished the pinned-down infantry units from the encroaching enemy forces. He then leveled the nose and unleashed a precise rocket volley right along the dense jungle edge. The infantry finally breathed easier. American ground forces received reliable close air support without the constant fear of misguided ordnance. The success of this direct sight engagement strategy rapidly expanded the operational scope of the attack helicopters. Command quickly assigned the heavy gunships to protect highly vulnerable transport formations across the theater. Cobra crews immediately transitioned to actively escorting the Huey fleets. They guarded the unarmed slicks, inserting troops, and shielded the dust-offs running medical evacuations. One unarmored machine at an ultra-low altitude. Protecting the transport fleets was just the first step. Command soon devised a new method to expose hidden jungle targets. The empty OH-6 Loach helicopter weighed about 1 metric ton, making it highly maneuverable but depriving it of any armor. Pilots called these flights hunter-killer missions. A two-man crew flew the Scout low and slow over the canopy. They deliberately provoked ground fire. They were live bait. Meanwhile, the heavy AH-1 Cobra loitered above. Out of sight, the attack ship waited for the trap to spring. Once the tracers flew, the Scout marked the source. The pilots dropped marker smoke grenades right over the hostile positions and immediately pulled away. Then the heavy ship dove in. The M134 6-barrel minigun delivered up to 6,000 rounds per minute onto the dropped grenade marker. The bait constantly took direct hits. The enemy destroyed 842 light scout helicopters by the end of the war. What was the price of 1 million combat flight hours? 300 destroyed machines. Firepower provided no perfect shield. The heavy gunships soon followed the light scouts into the dirt. Command deployed 1,100 helicopters to the theater. Wear and tear degraded the fleet. Then came the concentrated anti-aircraft fire. Take Operation Lam Son. The enemy shot down 26 helicopters in just 6 weeks. The dense thickets constantly reeked of the acrid smoke of burning aviation fuel from recently downed machines. Wreckage littered the jungle floor. Every deep mission invited a lethal outcome. June 18, 1968. A 4-man reconnaissance patrol operated far behind enemy lines. They gathered intelligence. The jungle provided zero safety. Now they needed an immediate way out. They waited for extraction,